we all know that the organization is seriously upside down financially and otherwise. And almost 2 weeks ago, for the first time that I've heard an interview from anybody, this was Gary Jobson, the U.S. Vice President, gave an interview on to a new friend of ours. I've gotten to know him at least by email and direct messaging to a Norwegian sailing magazine called Sail Magazine. And I think it's really important. It's a little long. It's 5.5, 6 minutes, but I think this is the first time we've seen something revelatory. Is that a word?
Revelatory.
Revelatory. Well, you be the judge, but this is Gary Jobson interview with a Norwegian magazine, and Mikael Thomason. I think you will enjoy this a lot.
Hey, how you doing?
Hello, Gary. Let me first say one thing, that I have not any agenda on this. I'm not for or against Kim Anderson or anybody, but I want to cover, I'm a journalist, and I want to cover the events that's happening in the world sailing. And I think there is an interest in the Scandinavian countries to know what's going on, and I want to be as accurate as possible.
Sure. Well, that's a good premise. Thank you.
Yeah. So, with regard to these signatures, I've actually sent an email to Kim to ask him to comment. I've said to him what I think I know, and I'd like him to have a chance to comment on it before I publish anything. So that.
Okay. Have you heard from him?
I haven't heard from him.
Okay.
I sent it yesterday.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see if he answers.
Yeah, I'm sure he has other things on his mind as well, but I think this is important, and he should respond to it. I think there are two issues that I want to hear about. One is the financial situation of world sailing, of course, and also you had these discussions with IOC yesterday. I suppose that was regarding the events that will be leading up to the next Olympics, how you can deal with qualification, the timing of the Olympics, etc. But I think also perhaps, I'm assuming, that you discussed the possibility of getting some advance funding from the IOC.
Correct. So it's unclear. The IOC is clearly trying to figure out exactly the new dates. We don't know that will be. We assume it'll be next summer, a year from now. And we, like almost all the other federations, sports federations, there are 33. Everybody's going to need some help, since usually you get your money soon after the Olympic Games, and now everybody's going to have to wait a year. So we're hoping that we get some kind of advance. I don't know what percentage that will be, but hopefully at least a quarter. But we'll see. We don't know. But we hope to hear that in the near future. As far as the qualifications, quite a number of the qualifying spots, country spots, are already taken, but it's not complete yet. And we can't have any regattas for a while, obviously, with the coronavirus. So there is a qualification committee, and that'll have to be determined when we can run additional regattas to finish out the qualification. And then many countries have determined who specifically will be representing those countries, but that too is not complete. So that's got to be determined. As far as the finances are concerned, we met this morning, and we're going to take some aggressive moves. The plan is to try and make sure that we keep all the staff employed for the time being, and we're going to look at our situation in London with our facility there, and that's going to happen in the next few days, so it's hard to write about. because we got to talk to the landlord and see what we can arrange. It's also unclear what help will come our way by the British government. They're going through their discussions too, just like is happening in the Congress in the U.S. But surely we're hoping that we get some assistance too with the employees, and so that remains to be seen. And then, as far as events are concerned, like I said, we're on one hand we don't have expenses for them, but we don't get revenue from them. So it's another thing that's got to be sorted out in the next month or two. So I'm confident that we will get the budget so that we can continue to operate probably at a more modest level between now and the end of the quad, which is going to be a year longer than we had, but we're going to have to trim quite a bit to be able to pull it off.
I understand that you have a 15-year lease on the offices in London, so it's probably not an option to find cheaper accommodation.
Well, it's under discussion. You know, a couple board members are going to be talking to the landlord in the next few days, and we'll hear a lot more. But one of the options would be a smaller space. Another option would be to move somewhere else. Another option would be to not have any rent for a year. I mean, there's a lot of options, so it's hard for me to speculate. But those discussions are going to happen. And I think the landlords in London are going to be open to these discussions, too. They don't want everybody leaving. You know, they need to accommodate lots of businesses and lots of others. So it's going to be an interesting couple weeks, to say the least.
When are you having your next meeting in the executive committee? Do you know?
April 6th.
So then you will be able to draw some more conclusions as to what's going to happen. You know, for the
right. I mean, that's yes, sir. I mean, that's 2 weeks from now, and we'll have a lot of answers and clarity. I think by that time. So it seems like a reasonable amount of time to learn a lot more. I wish I could give you more definitive answers, but you know, I think everybody's kind of scrambling, and you're doing all this on the phone and not in the room, and but you know, the attitude on the board today was good. Everybody spoke. It was very methodical. It's not easy connecting people from Europe and China and New Zealand and Uruguay and me in the U.S. You know, it's a lot of time zones to hook, and yet everybody was on the call, everybody. And our discussion this morning was about 2 hours, I think. Pretty much 2 hours. So
that was a good discussion, I thought.
Yeah, I was worried, but it was a little bit like a sailboat race. You know, okay, you got a storm coming, but batten down the hatches and try to prepare. And
not like the passing race of 1979.
No, that was. Glad I don't have to do that again. It was a long time ago.
That was something.
It was a tough one.
But Gary, what happens now? I mean, Andy Hunt is out of the management group, and he's been so for a few months before the AGM in Bermuda. Has he been replaced? Who's looking after this?
Not yet. So we have a search firm, and we've done some interviews. I'm on that committee, and we boiled it down to a couple candidates. And it's confidential, and the reason is, you know, these candidates have jobs, so they you know, we want to talk to them, but if they're not hired, they don't want to ruin their present job. And those discussions will be next couple of weeks. But having said that, you know, the earliest we would hire somebody would be July. It's not going to happen right away, and you know, we have to get the finances organized and see where we're at. And so that would be the earliest we would hire somebody.
The situation with the signatures and everything, you said to me earlier that you would not push that too much at the moment, but inevitably it's going to happen, end up at the ethics committee of World Sailing. Is that it?
You mean on the Commanderson letters that he wrote or sent on
and with your
sent without my permission?
Right.
Yeah. So Scott Perry and I sent a letter to the chairman and vice chairman of the ethics committee that we will have a complaint going, but we're not going to send it until this coronavirus calms down. People are too busy and it's too confusing a time to get into that. So they know we have something, but we haven't sent it yet.
Are you discussing at this point? I guess it's the same thing, that people are preoccupied with so many other important matters, the Olympics and the coronavirus, etc., that elections at the end of the year is not the main issue, I suppose.
Well, for me, my term ends on November 1st, so I am happily not involved in the election. Same with Con Hyde Lee and Scott Perry. The three of us term out, and Jan Rogesho, the French athlete rep, he terms out as an athlete rep at the end of this quad. So four of us won't be back, and then the other five, they all have to decide whether they want to run again or not. But nobody talked about it. It was too much other things.
Absolutely. But you have ruled out that you are a candidate.
Yeah, I'm 70 or almost, a couple months I turned 70, and
that's my age.
I've had lots of health issues over the years, and I kind of want to enjoy my time here in the next 5-10 years. And I don't think I could spend 8 years commuting to Europe with World Sailing. I've done enough. So no, I'm not a candidate.
Where do you think the candidate should come from? Europe or North America or Asia?
Well, certainly Europe would make a lot of sense.
Mm.
If it stays in London or in the UK, you really need to be European based. It'd be hard to commute back and forth across the Atlantic or to come from Oceania or Asia. I just think even South America, it'd be hard. You need to be European based.
Mm.
I mean, you know that Gerardo Seeliger wants to run,
yeah,
and has been making noise, and there's rumors of other people.
Some Italians.
But like I said, personally, I'm happy I'm not doing the election again.
Mm. Okay, that's the end of that rather unceremonious end of that interview. Let's go to the letter, because there was some interesting, actually breaking news in there. As we've reported on this show before, I was sent a letter on the 2nd of March from the office in London, and it was allegedly, it was ostensibly from Gary Jobson and Scott Perry, two of the vice presidents. And it read, "Dear Mr. Eamon, on February 18th, a Sailing Illustrated TFE live show was aired on Facebook. The show raised several issues regarding world sailing, including misleading and inaccurate information about the working of our organization, the finances of our organization, and the World Sailing Trust. In the show, you specially mentioned us, meaning the two of them, two vice presidents, as the source of the misleading and inaccurate information. We unequivocally deny these allegations and quite honestly find your actions and attacks against us and world sailing to be completely unjustified. We ask that you immediately retract your statements, especially your claim that we are the source of your misinformation." Now, of course, we never made those statements. The only statements we made have since been borne out again. Once again, we've been telling you about the financial problems. We broke that news 1.5 years ago. But this letter, it didn't take a rocket scientist to see that this letter, the signatures on this letter were cut and paste. Two different pens, whole different kettle of fish. So I started checking her out. I didn't worry too much about it because I knew there was something afoot. And the very next day came this email from Mr. Scott Perry, one of the vice presidents from Uruguay, whom I've never met, never spoken with, and even to this day. Dear Mr. Tom Eamon, I owe you an apology. At the recently convened meeting of the Board of Directors of World Sailing, Kim Anderson informed the board that you, in your 18th February program, mentioned Gary Jobson and myself as the source of information about World Sailing's financial difficulties. The President further urged Gary and myself to write a letter to you seeking an apology for having mentioned us as the source of the financial information. During the meeting, the President sent both of us a letter which he drafted. I made some corrections to the letter and asked Gary for his comments. Gary very wisely stated at the board meeting that he would only agree to send a letter after he had listened to your 18th February program. In any event, the letter was sent to you yesterday with both Gary's and my electronic signatures without either of our permissions. I have now listened to your 18th February program, which, by the way, I found very interesting. It is patently obvious that the Scott you mentioned in the program is Scott McLeod, not the writer here, Scott Perry. Please accept my apology for this sad confusion. Yours sincerely, Scott W. Scott Perry. So these two guys did exactly the right thing. And now you've just heard in this interview that they have written, Scott and Gary, Mr. Perry and Mr. Jobson, have written a letter to the Ethics Commission of World Sailing saying they're going to file a formal complaint in due course about this terrible action by the president. Now, I've been aware of this since early March, and I have been asked not to discuss it, and that's why you haven't heard peep from me in all this time, because it was as it was proceeding within the upper echelons of world sailing. And when I'm asked not to say something, I do not. I keep a confidence. Now, with this interview, Gary has revealed that, in fact, it is going before the Ethics Commission, which I can confirm from prior knowledge is also happening. This is the most astonishing thing. First of all, the allegations were completely wrong, but for the president of an organization to forge the signatures on a letter that then is sent to it's a Crutonic journalist somewhere in San Francisco. Okay, come on. I only served in that organization for 25 years. But to do that without their permission was just astonishing, and I fully commend and bravo Zulu to Scott and Gary for setting this straight and for taking this action to the Ethics Commission of World Sailing. And by the way, we know that it's also gone above and beyond that, meaning not just the Ethics Commission of World Sailing, but to a body above World Sailing. So this is the person in question, and about whom I'm not going to say anything more, President Kim Anderson, because frankly, I don't think anything else needs to be said.